الله الرحمن الرحيم عسى الله أن يجعل بينكم وبين الذين عاديتم منهم مودة والله قدير والله غفور رحيم لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم أن تبروهم وتقسطوا إليهم إن الله يحب المقسطين إنما ينهاكم الله عن الذين قاتلوكم في الدين وأخرجوكم من دياركم وظاهروا على إخراجكم أن تولوهم ومن يتولهم فأولئك هم الظالمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا جاءكم المؤمنات مهاجرات فامتحنوهن الله أعلم بإيمانهن فإن علمتموهن مؤمنات فلا ترجعوهن إلى الكفار لا هن حل لهم ولا هم يحلون لهن وآتوهم ما أنفقوا ولا جناح عليكم أن تنكحوهن إذا آتيتموهن أجورهن ولا تمسكوا بعصم الكوافر واسألوا ما أنفقتم وليسألوا ما أنفقوا ذلكم حكم الله يحكم بينكم والله عليم حكيم وإن فاتكم شيء من أزواجكم إلى الكفار فعاقبتم فآتوا الذين ذهبت أزواجهم مثل ما أنفقوا واتقوا الله الذي أنتم به مؤمنون يا أيها النبي إذا جاءك المؤمنات يبايعنك على ألا يشركن بالله شيئا ولا يسرقن ولا يزنين ولا يقتلن أولادهن ولا يأتين ببهتان يفترينه بين أيديهن وأرجلهن ولا يعصينك في معروف فبايعهن واستغفر لهن الله إن الله غفور رحيم لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم أن تبروهم وتقسطوا إليهم إن الله يحب.
In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. It may be that God will grant you love and friendship between you and those whom you now hold as enemies. For God has power over all things, and God is oft forgiving, most merciful. God forbids you not with regards to those who fight you not for your faith, nor drive you out of your homes, from dealing kindly and justly with them. For God loveth those who are just. God only forbids you with regard to those who fight you for your faith, and drive you out of your homes, and support others in driving you out from turning to them for friendship and protection. It is such as turn to them in these circumstances that do wrong. O you who believe, when there come to you believing women refugees, examine and test them. God knows best as to their faith. If ye ascertain that they are believers, then send them not back to the unbelievers. They are not lawful wives for the unbelievers, nor are the unbelievers lawful husbands for them. But pay the unbelievers what they have spent on their dower, and there will be no blame on you if you marry them on payment of their dower to them. But hold not to the guardianship of unbelieving women. Ask for what ye have spent on their dowers, and let the unbelievers ask for what they have spent on the dowers of women who come over to you. Such is the command of God. He judges with justice between you, and God is full of knowledge and wisdom. And if any of your wives deserts you to the unbelievers, and ye have an occasion by the coming over of a woman from the other side, then pay to those whose wives have deserted the equivalent of what they had spent on their dower, and fear God in whom ye believe. O ye who believe, turn not for friendship to people on whom is the wrath of God. Of the hereafter, they are already in despair, just as the unbelievers are in despair about those buried in graves. Apparent religious hatred or enmity or persecution may be due to ignorance or overzeal in a soul, which God will forgive and use eventually in his service, as happened in the case of Hadrat Omar, who was a different man before and after his conversion. As stated before, we should hate evil, but not men as such. Even with unbelievers, unless they are rampant and out to destroy us and our faith, we should deal kindly and equitably, as is shown by our Holy Prophet's own example. Under the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, women under guardianship, including married women, who fled from the Quraysh in Mecca to the Prophet's protection at Medina, were to be sent back. But before this ayat was issued, the Quraysh had already broken the treaty, and some instruction was necessary as to what the Medina Muslims should do in those circumstances. Muslim women married to pagan husbands in Mecca were oppressed for their faith, and some of them came to Medina as refugees. After this, they were not to be returned to the custody of their pagan husbands at Mecca, as the marriage of believing women with non-Muslims was held to be dissolved if the husbands did not accept Islam. But in order to give no suspicion to the pagans that they were badly treated as they lost the dower they had given on marriage, that dower was to be repaid to the husbands. Thus helpless women refugees were to be protected at the cost of the Muslims. The points on which women entering Islam should pledge themselves are similar to the points which apply to men, but in verse 12 the question is about women, and especially such as were likely in those early days of Islam to come from pagan society into Muslim society, in the conditions explained before. A pledge on these points would search out their real motives. Firstly, to worship none but the one true God. Secondly, not to steal. Thirdly, not to indulge in sex outside the marriage tie. Fourthly, not to commit infanticide. The pagan Arabs were prone to female infanticide. Fifthly, not to indulge in slander or scandal. And sixthly, generally to obey loyally the law and principle of Islam. The last was a comprehensive and sufficient phrase, but it was good to indicate also the special points to which attention was to be directed in those special circumstances. Obedience was, of course, to be in all things just and reasonable. Islam requires strict discipline, but not slavishness. If pledges are sincerely given for future conduct, admission to Islam is open. If there is anything in the past for which there is evidence of sincere repentance, forgiveness is to be prayed for. God forgives in such cases. How can man refuse to give such cases a real chance? In the last verse we come back to the theme with which we started in this surah, that we should not turn for friendship and intimacy to those who break God's law and are outlaws in God's kingdom. The unbelievers who do not believe in a future life can therefore have no hope beyond this life. Miserable indeed is the life to them, for the ills of this life are real to them, and they can have no hope of redress. But such is also the state of others, people of the book or not, who wallow in sin and incur the divine wrath. Even if they believe in a future life, it can only be to them a life of horror, punishment, and despair. For those of faith, the prospect is different. They may suffer in this life, but this life to them is only a fleeting shadow that will soon pass away. The reality is beyond. There will be full redress in the beyond, and achievements and felicities such as they can scarcely conceive in the terms of this life. You have been listening to the Holy Quran.